Okay. All right. So we are recording. I presume, let me just check here. I'm presuming the AI companion is, oh, it's going. It says, all right, that's fine. So, no problem. Yeah, okay, so let's start the meeting. So welcome everybody to the December meeting of the PRC. Sarah is rejoining us, which is nice to see. Sarah was a visitor at our last meeting, and we've now confirmed her membership in the CCGA. So we welcomed her to the PRC. So thanks, Sarah. Nice to see you. All right. First things first, we just have two regrets from Peter, and Peter he's teaching on Tuesdays this semester, so he's returning to our fold in January, and that's nice to see. And then I think Brendan, it's January and February. We're going to miss you. Dirty dog. He's going to New Zealand, I think. It's very nice. Yeah, and Howard. Howard's missing today, so hopefully when he returns, hopefully next month, he'll catch up on the Justice Report and the Justice Committee and its work. Although there's not going to be much work for anybody between now and our meeting in January, so everything adjourns. I think it's the 19th, if I'm not missed the date. So Parliament will be away for a little while, and God knows what's going to happen before we return in January. So we'll wait and see. Okay, so I've circulated the agenda, so can I have a motion to accept the agenda as circulated? Okay, Brendan, in the second here, I'll take Matthew, so thank you. Okay, next is dealing with the minutes, and I think it's pretty much a consensus these days that what we're doing now, instead of, and Peter was doing it for quite a while, is what we're going to do in lieu of written minutes are basically to generate the report that the AI companion does on Zoom. I think it does a decent job. Everybody's pretty happy with it. And of course, we'll continue with publishing the YouTube of the meeting itself. So if anybody has any questions reading the AI generation of whatever it does, they can obviously check it verbatim with YouTube, with the actual meeting itself. So everybody's pretty much of the same mindset that both of those things pretty comprehensively cover what goes on during our meetings. So I think that's fine. So we'll leave it at that, unless something changes in the future, and we'll address it at the time. Okay, news and announcements. So we don't have any new news and announcements unless anybody has something they want to bring to us for our attention and discussion. Okay, so that takes us to business arising in parliamentary committees. Again, Howard is away, so we don't have a report for the Justice and Human Rights Committee in the Commons. And Rob's here. So Rob, you have a report on public safety?
Yes, short though.
Sure.
They've been focusing on the electoral interference and criminal activities by agents of the government of India, and growing problem of car thefts in Canada. Their consideration of the draft report, clause by clause, and Russian interference and disinformation campaigns in Canada. So there were 5 meetings. There wasn't a lot directly related to us, except for the supplementary estimates part, where the public safety portfolio appeared, and the representatives went over what their asks were for the sup. So I could go through them if you wish. We had briefly, or
Yeah, go. Yeah, we have lots of time, so go ahead, Rob.
okay, great. So Public Safety Canada focusing on the car theft prevention and deportation, or rather exportation, um, illegal exportation, I should say, border control, disaster financial assistance, so 14.9 million for them. Was mentioned, and I can't say that captures the whole thing, but sometimes when they're doing their summaries, they're mentioning amounts item by item, and others don't do that, but they do mention some amounts. So they did mention 14.9 million. That's Public Safety Canada only. Now the RCMP went item by item, so supporting border integrity services, building trust with the staff, contract policing 440 million. I believe I heard or understood that Canada is assuming the presidency of the G7. So for that, there's some work to be done by the RCMP, mainly for security planning and procuring advanced procurement of equipment. So 45 million for that. Protection services for public figures, 26 million. Foreign interference, criminal investigation, 16 million. Migrant smuggling strategy, 7.6 million. Haiti security, 2.4 million. As for CBSA, they have monies going toward, or want to put monies towards the port infrastructure. There's numerous things happening or have been ongoing on that. And they have an action plan for auto car theft. CSE, they have changes in the offender population and price fluctuation. So 58 million for that is their ask. And the operations related to workplace injuries, which are mainly costs for workers' comp benefits. So 29.7 million for that. And they mentioned doing a lot of work, investing in drone detection and preventing drops of drugs and weapons, but didn't mention a price when they talked about that. So that's all I have for those folks. CSIS mentioned an increase of 60 million for this year, and I didn't understand that if that was additional monies between now and the end, or that was something they're kind of referencing for the whole year, but they mentioned 60 additional million dollars. So that's all, unless there's questions.
Thanks, Rob. I just gonna make a note. Oh, go ahead, Matthew.
Rob, pardon me, I've been away for a while. Does this budget have say anything about a proposed $1 billion investment in border security yet?
They, I didn't get a number from my listening to the audio. I listened to had to listen to the audio because the written record wasn't available. So I listened to the initial parts of, or their, introductory speeches on what they were asking for. So I didn't actually get a number from the CBSA. So, but the RCMP, they have some monies toward that. That was, there was some discussion on that. I can tell you that because I had to fast forward through different pieces. I didn't get it, but I don't have a number. Sorry.
I have a follow-up, Rob.
Yeah.
There was a recent court case that I believe it was the province of Quebec lost against Aboriginal policing, and which means that the Aboriginal policing was underfunded by the province, and I believe this was a federal court decision. Any mention of that in the budget?
I wasn't able to, again, I just listened to parts of the recording. So what I can do for you, if you wish, is keep an eye out for the evidence in writing, and between now and the next meeting, and I'll take a look for you and see if I can find something on that. But I don't have anything on that. I don't have anything on that at this moment because I didn't hear anything for the parts that I listened to.
All right, Rob, one last follow-up question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. I presume that under the Corrections Canada budget, there was no money or discussion about alternatives to incarceration.
I didn't hear that. Just that the changes in a specific way was referenced by way of changes in the offender population and price fluctuations, 58 million for that. So, and then the questioning from the members of the committee, they spent very little time talking to the Correctional Service of Canada, a large amount of time talking to the RCMP and the Canada Border Services people.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome.
Thanks, Matthew. Thanks, Rob. Anything else for Rob? I was actually going to follow. My question was going to be just before Matthew asked his regarding the $1 million that is apparently going to be allocated for border security. There's going to be apparently there's going to be a turf war between who gets it, whether it's the CBSA or the Mounties. Both of them saying that they're more than capable of increasing their presence at the border and what have you. So yeah, so I don't know whether that's again I doubt whether anything's going to happen with that over Christmas, but come January we have Trump, so there we go. So we'll see what happens with the $1 billion. But that's a significant expense for public safety. All right, thank you. Okay, let's move on then to the Senate committees, and the first one is Brendan. So the Senate Legal and Constitutional Affairs.
Yeah, thanks, Miles. Maybe I'll just take a quick second to opine on that, what you just said there, the bit of the turf war between the CBSA and the RCMP. It's something that I anticipate happening as well, and something that I think is going to lead to complaints and confusion between complaints between migrant or people coming to the borders and like, is it the RCMP or not? So, I mean, it seems a little, it seems almost too serendipitous that the federal government just passed that new bill establishing the PC, like the Public Complaints and Review Commission that deals with RCMP and CBSA. I don't know. It just seems kind of strange that that just passed and now there's going to be potential, yeah, turf wars between RCMP and CBSA. It's, yeah. Um, I don't know. Maybe there's nothing there, but it was just something I noticed and I thought was a little fun.
Sure. Thanks, Brendan.
Yeah, the Standing Senate Committee on Legal and Constitutional Affairs met 6 times since our last PCRC meeting. One of the bills that they looked at was S15, which is not really of great interest to the PRC. It's something I think I've mentioned before. It's something that the committee looked at in the spring, I believe. It's on exotic animals, I believe, and there's another 2 meetings on to examine a report on the Statutes Repeal Act for 2024. Again, not a whole lot of interest there for us. But the two that are actually, or there were 2 bills that were reviewed. Obviously, the since our last meeting, as Miles was discussing a little bit earlier, C40, so the Miscarriage of Justice Review Commission Act, had 2 meetings. One where it completed clause by clause. As Miles mentioned, no amendments were made specifically to keep it moving for fear of the bill failing. However, there were pretty significant comments on that. And I'll just maybe review or highlight some. But like I said, the senators and witnesses were all in agreement that, yeah, the bill should pass. And we don't want to be stopping that. Um, the Observations made were on a variety of issues, so I'll just read some of the headlines. But there's comments on systemic issues, sentencing and parole decisions, reappointment of the commissioner, on diversity, and on languages. Miles mentioned the diversity aspect earlier to make sure that members of the commission try to represent Canada in different ways. Interestingly, I think C20 that went through Parliament had a very similar discussion of should members of this independent commission, how much should we endeavor to ensure that it reflects Canada's diversity? I think some of it actually did end up, I think it did end up in observations, surely. I don't believe it actually made it into the legislation for fear of like, well, how do we actually, ensure this in the commission? Does it become tokenism if we say one person of this background, one person of that background? But regardless, there was a push from the senators to ensure that there's some sort of diversity among members of the commission. Interestingly, the observations also speak to not reappointing the commissioner after their tenure as the commissioner. So they actually suggest perhaps maybe future legislative changes to that. I mean, not speaking as a public servant, obviously, but with experience as a public servant, I wonder, like, if that's a great idea? Miles, I'm not, maybe that's a larger question for debate. I wonder, like, trying to cut how long someone's commissioner, I feel like you lose a lot of institutional knowledge. So anyway, it didn't end up being proposed in legislation, but there was recommendations to that effect that the senators supported. There was also a recommendation that the commission also be able to review sentencing and parole decisions. Um, and another major observation was around interpreting the mandate of the new commission. And I actually hadn't realized this myself till I read the report, but there appears to be 2 mandate statements in the legislation, one that is broader than the other. One reads, one reads quite simply that the commission's mandate is to review applications made under Part 21.1 on the grounds of miscarriage of justice, which is what the report states as Clause 6 in the legislation. In Clause 4, however, it speaks more broadly about that, but also about systemic issues. I am kind of curious how that made it through, and it's kind of interesting. I know we want to pass the bill, but I wonder what kind of confusion that might cause for the future commission, almost having two mandates, and I suppose that will eventually depend on the commissioner or the head of the commission. I forget. I think commissioner will be the head of it. Um, so that could cause some confusion, I believe. But the senators recommended taking a more broad. They observed. I should say. I shouldn't say recommended. They made an observation that the broader scope in the bill should prevail over the narrower scope to include more systemic issues. I think that's it for more or less it for the observations. Actually, no, the last observation was on languages, acknowledging that not all those who may require a review of some sort, their first language may not be French nor English, and therefore there should be accommodations for those people, especially where it comes to, let's say, Indigenous peoples who may or may not have those as their first languages. So. That was one observation made. That was now C40, as Miles mentioned. It's currently in third reading. It is going before the Senate today. Hopefully, it can pass. But again, like Miles mentioned, there's a few more sitting days. I'm sure we're all hoping that it can pass. The second bill that is currently before the committee is C321. Actually, sorry, it's not before the committee. A report was being considered. So C321 is an act to amend the criminal code, assaults against persons who provide health services and first responders. I spoke about this at our last meeting. Now the report wasn't made, it hasn't been made public yet, or it's not on the website yet. But it appears, I believe this clause by clause was held. Most witnesses were in favor. Senators were in favor generally of the bill as well. There were some fears that it might be a little overbroad and it might be burdensome or perhaps duplicative in the criminal code. Nevertheless, the bill passed through the committee. So I'm waiting to see exactly what the report says more specifically. Um, but I anticipate it heading to the to third reading at some point. Who knows though? I know that the Senate committee moving forward. I mean, I think they have a meeting today and tomorrow, and it appears for the rest of the month they're going to be looking at Bill C-320, which is an act to amend the Corrections and Conditional Release Act, which is disclosure of information to victims. I'm not going to speak about that yet because they haven't addressed it, but that's sort of next on the agenda for the committee. And that's it for me.
Thanks, Brendan. Matthew, you had your hand.
Just a minute. Hello. Well, fine. I'm in a meeting right now. Can you call me back? Oh, another hour. Yeah, thanks. Yep. Brendan,
Yeah.
thank you for that stellar report. Do I understand correctly that the commission legislation should be read broadly, and that includes applications by dangerous offenders and people who have been sentenced to Buck Rogers time can apply to the commission for review?
That I'm not sure. I suppose when I was talking about the narrow versus wider mandate, I think it's more about the mandate or of the abilities of the commission to investigate more largely. That's where we get in question of the wider the narrow mandate in terms of application for who can or cannot apply for review. That I'm actually not sure of. I know the observations suggest future amendments to allow review of sentencing and parole. I'm not sure if the current legislation would allow that. Miles, I wonder maybe if you could If you could clarify that, or if you know.
No, it doesn't. If the application is not about the merits of the decision of the finding of guilt, if that's not the issue, but you're actually when you want to challenge the DO designation, that's not within the mandate of this commission. All right, that's a sentencing issue, as Brendan was just saying, and that's an observation that will be ostensibly addressed in the 5-year review going forward.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry about maybe just to follow up on that. Would the DO designation, is that technically part, like I know it happens at sentencing, but is it considered part of sentencing? And is that like could that potentially be included should sentencing eventually be added to the mandate?
Oh yeah, I think if sentencing actually it was recommended in the Reform Westmoreland Traore report, the committee report that went to the Commons to basically create this bill. It was that that designation was specifically mentioned as open to be part of this process. And obviously it wasn't accepted when the Commons became generated C40.
The
Thanks.
DO legislation, Brendan, is Section 752 et seq, which is part of sentencing in the Federal Criminal Code.
Mhm.
And the only reason I raise this is because I happen to be an academic who's written about the dangerous offender legislation and suggested it is essentially a de facto life without parole sentence that, in my humble view, not being a lawyer, Miles raises charter issues.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Section 12 cruel and unusual punishment argument. Yeah, forget that. Thanks, guys. Anything else, Brendan? Okay, good. Thank you. Any other questions for Brendan? Great, thank you. And Dick, the next committee is Senate Human Rights.
Well, this committee's had 4 meetings since the last PRC meeting. 2 of the meetings concluded the hearing of witnesses on the topic of aging out of foster care, which I talked about last time. And 2 meetings in December involved hearings on a new topic, anti-Semitism. Probably the most significant development here is on December 3rd, the committee released its report on forced global displacement entitled Ripped from Home, the Global Crisis of Forced Displacement. The committee held hearings on this topic between October of last year and June of this year. And I'll just briefly mention a few findings and recommendations. Global forced displacement is a crisis on a scale not seen since World War II, according to this report. The number of displaced persons is more than 114 million. 40% of them are children. Globally, there's no credible plan to address the crisis, which is expected to get worse, in part as a result of climate change. International and Canadian law recognize universal rights relating to forced global displacement, including the right to seek asylum from persecution in another country. And the burden of supporting forcibly displaced people is not equally shared. Canada, by its geography alone, is protected from the large-scale movement of refugees. A few of the recommendations of in this report are as follows. They call for increased funding to humanitarian aid groups in countries that host refugees. Secondly, Canada should advocate for mandatory proportional contributions from UN member states to relevant UN agencies. Third, Canada should work with like-minded partners to leverage the role of institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to reduce the refugee burden on host countries. Fourth, Canada should lead in developing displacement responses to issues in the Americas, including pursuing a Canada-US-Mexico framework on human smuggling. And the last one I'll mention is they recommend that Canada must ensure that it meets its legal obligation to continually review the policies and practices of the United States to verify that country's status as a safe third country. I'm not sure how relevant all that is to this committee, but those are the basics.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Any questions or comments for Rick? Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on then. So there is no other business arising that we have in the agenda. So that takes us to bills under consideration, and there's not a lot happening, and there'll probably be even less happening before the next meeting, but let's just touch on them. So again, back to Bill C-40, which is a topic for most of today's meeting. It's at third reading, so we're waiting to see what happens, and we've talked about that. So we'll hopefully have something positive report when we come back here in January. So that's it for the government bills in the Commons. And as for private member bills in the Commons, I think we have one bill that's done something. Yeah, Bill C-332, an act to amend the criminal code controlling or coercive conduct, basically, which is deals with I'll just reiterate it. This enactment amends the criminal code to create an offense of engaging in controlling or coercive conduct that has a significant impact on the person towards whom the conduct is directed, including a fear of violence, etc. And it had its second reading on December the 5th, and it's now in committee. All right. And I don't think there's any other private bills in the Commons. I'm wrong. Bill C-420 is a new bill, an act to amend the code for criminal organizations, and I'll just give you the synopsis of it. So this enactment amends the criminal code to require a judge who hears an application for a restraint order in respect of property that may be proceeds of crime obtained by committing an offense related to the activities of a criminal organization to make the order if the judge is satisfied that there are reasonable grounds to believe the property could disappear, be dissipated, or reduced in value. The enactment also provides that any person convicted of an offense relating to a criminal organization must demonstrate to the court the property that the person owns is not proceeds of crime, failing which the property is forfeited to the Crown. Finally, provides that the governor and council may establish a list of entities that consists of criminal organizations. So again, this is a private member's bill, so how far it gets is to be seen. It had its first reading on November 26th last. All right, government, in the Senate, we don't have any government Senate bills to review. Private member bills, the first one that's had some progress is actually one that is near and dear to us, is Bill S-212 to amend the Criminal Records Act and to make consequential amendments. This deals with Senator Kim Pate's bill with respect to spent convictions. Which the CCGA has submitted a brief in that regard, and it's moved to a third reading in the Senate. So that's a change. Nothing has happened for a year on this bill, so this is the first thing that's happened, certainly this year. Bill S-224, basically to amend the criminal code regarding trafficking in persons. It's actually been dropped from the order paper, so it's been removed. So I'll take it out of the agenda for our next meeting. And let me just see, do we have anything else from the Senate? We don't. Okay, so that's it for the bills. There wasn't that much. Does anybody have anything else to offer to the PRC for the benefit of the membership? Oh, Matthew?
I've been tasked and been negligent about drafting a letter to the Minister of Public Safety with respect to the alternatives to incarceration, particularly as it relates to Correctional Service of Canada. I'd like some feedback, if I might request it. A federal election, excuse me, I'm nursing a cold. A federal election is scheduled for next year. There is a high probability that the government at the federal level is going to change rather dramatically. And it means that a letter on alternatives to incarceration is going to likely fall on deaf ears. Should we proceed? Should I proceed with this project, or is it a lost cause?
Well, it's a waiting brief on our agenda. I think Kyle was going to help you on this, Matthew. I think so. Anyway, yeah, I mean, the reality is probably exactly what you're suggesting. But far be it from us to basically look into a crystal ball and indicate what's going to happen. I mean, it's totally up to you. I mean, it's something that the PRC has endorsed, for quite a while now, and I think it's a legacy project to some degree because alternatives to incarceration is a topic that is important and something that should be on somebody's table for review, and nobody's better to do that than you. But again, you're not wrong in that if it makes it to into the current parliament, whether it has any legs in the next parliament is anybody's guess, depending on, of course, who forms the government. So, again, I'm open. I mean, if the membership thinks that that it's worthwhile and should be, at least put forward, at least as a record of what the CCGA stands for or endorses. I'm all for it. If you think, Matthew, that it's something that is going to take up your time and not really see the light of day, then that's certainly your decision.
Well, I'm always waiting to hear from our sage, Irving, who's better connected on politics than I am, and who usually tries to manage my impulses.
I think, thank you, Matthew, for that kind introduction. I think you should go ahead. In a worst case scenario, first of all, nothing ventured, nothing gained. But in a worst case scenario, it puts down a marker. And I presume that, let's say, I think what you're alluding to is the expectation based on polls that the Conservatives will gain quite a significant majority if ever there's an election in Canada again. And well, it's got to be by October something 25, I think, next year. I would certainly go with it. And I don't expect, Matthew, that just because, let's say, a majority conservative government comes in and they're more conservative than the Liberals have been in the past, although they're not terribly liberal, either. We're not going to go to sleep for 4 years. I mean, we're gonna send in briefs and we're gonna give them advice and hopefully wise counsel, and perhaps we'll complain about things. But I think we have to be on the record, and I think it's a damn good start. So I would certainly encourage you to do it, and I'd be pleased to do some polishing, if you like, at some point, or editing, whatever you like, and then go back and forth on it. I think you should pursue it.
And I certainly endorse that. What do you think, Matthew?
I'm ready to rock and roll.
Please do.
Good. Super.
Please do. So I will make a slight adjustment on our agenda with respect to its status, and return to keep track of how it's going, meeting to meeting. Thank you. That's great. Nice to see that. Anything else for the meeting as a whole? Okay, everybody. Listen, thank you very much. We've had a good year. The PRC, we've got things done. We've appeared before Commons and the Commons last year, the Senate this year. That's good. We're making an impact, I hope, and doing a good job for our membership and for criminal justice in Canada. So again, thanks everybody. Listen, have a wonderful holiday season. And we'll see everybody hopefully back here on January the 14th. And Happy New Year.
Okay, same to you.
Happy holidays, everybody. All the best.
Hey guys,
Thanks, Miles.
thanks
Bye,
very
guys.
much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thanks, Miles. See you guys.